Hi there, and welcome to Q English. In this series, we explore the lives of amazing people and help you improve your English at the same time. Ready? Let's dive in. Warren McCulloch, Legacy, Influence, and the Price of a Life, Part 4. Chapter 1. Looking back from the edge of time. In the final years of his life, Warren McCulloch did not present himself as a triumphant founder of a new science. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic claims that the mystery of the mind had been conquered. Instead, there was a quiet, reflective quality in his conversations, a sense that he understood both how much had been achieved and how much remained unresolved. The world around him had changed almost beyond recognition. When he was born in 1898, the airplane was still experimental. Electricity was spreading unevenly across cities, and psychology was barely an independent discipline. By the late 1960s, computers filled entire rooms. The language of information had entered everyday scientific discussion, and humans were preparing to walk on the moon. In this transformed world, the idea that the brain might be understood as a network of logical units no longer sounded absurd. It sounded plausible, even obvious to some. Yet McCulloch knew how long it had taken for such plausibility to emerge. He remembered the early skepticism, the puzzled expressions, the polite dismissals. He also remembered the intensity of those early collaborations, the late-night discussions with Walter Pitts, the heated exchanges at the Macy conferences, the excitement of discovering that a simple, formal model could describe something as intricate as neural firing. As he aged, he seemed less interested in defending specific models and more interested in preserving a certain intellectual attitude. He valued courage, the willingness to cross disciplinary boundaries. He valued precision, the discipline of logic that prevented imagination from dissolving into fantasy. And he valued humility, the recognition that every model simplifies what it describes. He sometimes spoke of the brain not merely as a machine, but as a system of constraints that makes meaning possible. A neuron does not fire at random. It responds to conditions. A network does not produce chaos alone. It produces patterns shaped by structure. Within those patterns, thought emerges. The language remained abstract, but beneath it was a lifelong effort to reconcile structure with experience. In quieter moments, he must have considered the personal cost of that effort. A life devoted to ideas can create distance from family, from ordinary routines, from simple ease. His intensity, which had once inspired students, could also overwhelm them. His passion for abstraction did not always leave room for emotional delicacy. Yet those who knew him often described his generosity. He welcomed younger scholars, listened to unconventional thinkers, and encouraged dialogue across fields. He did not guard knowledge jealously. He treated ideas as common ground to be cultivated. Looking back, he did not see a single breakthrough that defined his life. Instead, he saw a long conversation between faith and science, between logic and biology, between isolation and collaboration. That conversation had begun in a disciplined Protestant household and had extended into laboratories and conference halls. As the end of his life approached in 1969, he did not witness the full flowering of artificial neural networks. He did not see personal computers or the internet, but he had already shifted the language in which such technologies would be discussed. He had asked, insistently and repeatedly, "Can thought be expressed in formal terms?" The world was still answering. Chapter 2. Misunderstood and Rediscovered. Legacy is rarely simple. Ideas travel through time in unexpected ways. Some are celebrated immediately. Others disappear for decades before returning under new names. McCulloch's work followed the second path. In the years after his death, neural network research experienced periods of decline. Symbolic artificial intelligence dominated much of the field. Researchers focused on explicit rules, logical reasoning systems, and carefully designed algorithms. The early models of artificial neurons seemed limited and impractical. For a time, it appeared that the logical calculus of 1943 had become a historical curiosity, important for its boldness, but surpassed by newer approaches. Yet history does not move in straight lines. In the 1980s, and especially in the early 21st century, neural networks returned with renewed power. Advances in computing made it possible to train large multi-layered systems. Concepts that once seemed abstract, distributed representation, threshold activation, network learning became central to machine learning. Researchers building deep neural networks rarely worked directly with McCulloch's original equations, but the conceptual foundation remained unmistakable. Neurons modeled as computational units, networks performing logical or quasi-logical operations, intelligence emerging from structured interaction. His early paper with Pitts was cited again and again, not because it solved modern problems, but because it marked a beginning. At the same time, misunderstandings persisted. Some critics accused early neural network theorists of reducing the human mind to machinery. Others, in their enthusiasm for artificial intelligence, exaggerated what computational models could achieve. McCulloch himself had resisted both extremes. He believed in formal modeling, but he never claimed that equations exhausted experience. In this tension between reduction and exaggeration, his voice still echoes. He reminds us that models are maps. They guide exploration but do not replace the territory. His interdisciplinary spirit also found new life. Fields such as cognitive science, computational neuroscience, and systems biology increasingly recognize the need to integrate mathematics, engineering, and philosophy. What once seemed scattered under the label cybernetics reappeared in more specialized forms. Yet something of the original daring sometimes faded. The early cyberneticists were unafraid to ask enormous questions. What is mind? What is communication? How does meaning arise in systems? Later generations, more cautious and specialized, often narrowed their focus. McCulloch belonged to a generation willing to risk intellectual overreach in order to open new ground. His name may not be as widely known as some later figures in artificial intelligence. He does not appear in popular culture as frequently as Alan Turing or John von Neumann, but within academic history, his influence runs quietly and persistently. The measure of a legacy is not always fame. Sometimes it is the vocabulary others use without noticing its origin. When scientists speak of neural networks, of computation in the brain, of feedback systems shaping behavior, they walk along paths he helped clear. Rediscovery does not erase misunderstanding, but it restores perspective. Chapter 3. Was it worth it? Every biography eventually arrives at a silent question. Was the life worth its cost? For Warren McCulloch, the cost was not dramatic scandal or public failure. It was subtler. It was the strain of thinking at the edge of disciplines, the loneliness of being ahead, the fragility of collaborations, the weight of unanswered questions. He did not build a single machine that transformed industry. He did not found a corporation. He did not win the most famous scientific prizes of his time. Instead, he changed the way of thinking. He showed that the brain could be described in logical terms without stripping it of dignity. He demonstrated that abstraction, when carefully constructed, could illuminate biology. He invited mathematicians into conversations about neurons and encouraged physicians to consider formal systems. In doing so, he blurred boundaries that once seemed fixed. Was it worth it? The answer lies not in applause, but in continuity. Today, when engineers design neural networks that recognize speech or images, they rely on principles that descend, however indirectly, from his early insights. When neuroscientists speak of circuits implementing functions, they echo his conceptual shift. When philosophers debate whether consciousness can emerge from computation, they continue a conversation he helped articulate, and yet the mystery remains. Consciousness is still not fully explained. Intelligence still surprises. Models grow more powerful, but questions deepen. Perhaps this unfinished quality is part of the value. Warren McCulloch's life suggests that understanding is not a final destination, but a movement, a willingness to hold structure and uncertainty together. He lived between faith and science without collapsing either into the other. He trusted logic without surrendering to simplification. He embraced collaboration without erasing individuality. When he died in 1969, he left behind no simple conclusion. Instead, he left an opening. The story that began in a disciplined New Jersey household, shaped by scripture and logic, traveled through lecture halls, hospital wards, conference rooms, and research laboratories. It crossed the birth of cybernetics and the early dreams of artificial intelligence. The boy who once listened carefully to English stories grew into a man who taught the world a new language for thinking about the mind. Whether fully understood or not, that language continues to evolve, and in that ongoing evolution, his life finds its answer. Thanks for learning with Ku English. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.